Well, President Biden is now speaking to troops in Poland. Annmarie Hordern is in Warsaw, and Aggi Cantrill is in Poland along the border with Ukraine. Let's kick it off with Annmarie here. Annmarie, you have reported from all around the world. I'm curious now that you are in Warsaw, what is most striking to you about the situation on the ground there?
Well, I think it's just the images come to life while you're walking around the streets. You see people with luggages, children holding their teddies, obviously. What Aggi is seeing at the border is the immediate effect of people fleeing. But here in Warsaw, it's about making sure people are getting that documentation. That's where I am at now, Ukrainian consulate, which at the moment is pretty much, there's a few, maybe 100 people or so here. But the past few days, the volunteers, they said people have been sleeping in tents, waiting outside, because some have fled without their documentation, without their passports. Maybe they have family in America. They're trying to go abroad. Their children don't have documentation. About language skills as well. How do they acclimate if they decide to stay in Poland? Do they get medical facilities, education for their children, banking, everyday basic needs for life? And that is what we were seeing really in the capital of Warsaw. And that's what the president is going to be seeing as he makes his way from a town just miles from the Ukrainian border up to Warsaw. And then tomorrow he'll have that bilateral with his counterpart right here in Warsaw.
Annmarie, the president clearly is not in Poland by accident. This is, as you say, the front line for the refugee crisis, the front line for Europe. We've seen the US and the EU signing this energy deal today. That obviously is going to help out Germany. It's going to help out some of the Baltic countries in terms of what they can do going forward on energy. What does Poland need? What does Poland need from the president of the United States?
Well, Poland definitely needs some help when it comes to what they're going to likely ask for is just more aid when it comes to the humanitarian crisis. So the United Nations says 10 million people were displaced, more than 3 million to the neighboring countries around Ukraine. Poland is the epicenter, more than 2 million people fleeing into Poland. Poland at the moment is really maxed out in terms of the services they can provide to make sure every individual is being accompanied for. So that is really what President Duda is likely going to ask the president. But Guy, we also should note this is going to be an interesting briefing and bilateral meeting between the President of the United States and his Polish counterpart, because before this humanitarian crisis, they were on the outskirts, especially with this administration. Yeah. This leader is a populist leader. There has been a lot of questions about the independence of the judiciary branch here, the level of independence of the media and their freedom of the press, as well as the liberal rights and the liberal way of the world and this administration, like LGBTQ rights. So this is definitely one where the president needs to extend an olive branch in terms of the humanitarian support, but it's also going to be a little bit tricky for him.
It is. So let's pick up on that. Annmarie, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Aggi Cantrill on the border right now. Aggi, as Annmarie's saying, he didn't come by accident. He is here for a reason. But it raises some really difficult questions for Europe. He could have gone and talked to the French. He could have gone and talked directly to the Germans. But he's in Poland. As Annmarie says, Poland has been on the periphery. Poland has had a very antagonistic relationship with the EU over the last few years. What does this signal? What does this trip do in terms of changing that narrative, do you think?
The thing that it really does is note the significance of Poland in this conflict with between Ukraine and Russia, because Poland's massive land border with Ukraine is of key security concern to the European Union as a whole and also the NATO alliance. And so what this is really signaling is that potentially some of those prior issues could have been shelved for the time being, while they look at Poland as being a very strong ally, especially when it comes to security concerns for the NATO alliance.
Aggi, let's go back to a moment about the humanitarian crisis. We just heard Annmarie talk about the efforts to get documentation in Warsaw right now. Can you talk to us a little bit about the intermediary step for people who are fresh out of Ukraine right now?
Yes, so the first thing that they're doing at the moment is making sure that the people who arrive on that border between Ukraine and Poland are then able to be transited to places that are able to accommodate them. We are seeing huge numbers of people cross that border, and now it's really a question of where they can go next. And so Poland is expecting a lot more aid, especially financial aid, when it comes to looking at what they can do to provide for these people. And then once they're here, it's also a question of looking at how to engage them into the labor force and into education. It's important to note that a huge amount of the people crossing this border are minors, many of whom are unaccompanied minors. And so it's not just a strain on the housing system and the healthcare system, but also getting these children into an education system, often when it's not a language that they already speak.